We'd like you to take your Bibles and turn to the book of Song of Solomon. It's in the Old Testament this morning. You can split your Bible in the middle, you get Psalms, and flip back a few books, and you'll find a little small book, only 8 or 9 or 10 chapters. It's written by King Solomon, and it's really his love map of what a sexual experience might look like. In fact, you can read this on several levels. There's kind of the surface level, and you miss all the symbolism behind it. And then there's a second level. It's almost like a biblical sexual manual. Well, should we talk about that in church? Well, probably better here than letting the media talk to our children, you know. We'll be very discreet. But at the same time, you can go to the third level. We'll do that when we share communion here in a bit. You go to the third level, and there's a picture of God's divine romance and his love for us all through this book. It's a beautiful, beautiful, fascinating book. Song of Solomon, turn to chapter 8. Now, this is a story of Solomon's first love, the Shunammite woman, and their relationship together. And we don't know exactly how he picked her. How did he find her? Well, I guess in some ways it's kind of like you and I go looking for a spouse or a husband. Now, as we work through this, you'll see that there's some principles here that define love. And whether you're married and see it in that perspective, or whether you're thinking about getting married, or you'll even see from parenting and grandparenting perspectives. There's a lot of truths here that flow to us about the subject of love. So you're looking for a mate. How do you find one of those? Julie walked in the door of the church where I was getting ready to preach. Ran right in, ran up to the piano, sat down, just sang a song. First time I saw her, I was very attracted. You know, that's kind of how I found her. How do you find one? Well, the Bible has some rather intriguing descriptions of how people in the Bible found a wife or a husband. And you're not going to believe some of this stuff, but they really are in the Bible. Here's some biblical advice on examples on how you might find a future spouse.
Suggestion number 1, don't be so picky. Grab as many as you can get. Solomon, 1 Kings 11, 1 through 3.
Suggestion number 2, if no one seems obvious at the moment, then just wander around a bit and finally you'll find one. Who was that? That was Cain, Genesis chapter 4.
The next one, find an attractive prisoner of war, bring her home, shave her head, trim her nails, and give her a new set of clothes. Then she's yours. Who did this? Any old Hebrew guy. Deuteronomy 21, 11 through 13.
Now here's a favorite. Go cut 200 foreskins after one of your future father-in-law's enemies and present them to him, and you get his daughter in trade. Who did that? David did. That's how he found his first wife, Michal. 1 Samuel 18.
Go to a party and hide. When the women come out to dance, grab one, carry her off, and she'll be your wife. The Benjaminites did that, those party animals, in Judges 21, 19 through 25.
So you're looking for a spouse. You know, most of us think about that at one time or other. I'll tell you how my daughter Bronwyn kind of worked through that. I want to show you a picture of her wedding dress. Isn't that a pretty dress? It's a gorgeous dress. You know how she found it? We were in Dallas visiting relatives, and she and her older sister decided just for fun they'd go looking at bridal dresses. And they found one they really liked. Now, Bronwyn's not engaged. She's kind of dating a guy named Richard.
I think they'd had 3 dates.
Maybe 3 dates, just getting started. And Bronwyn finds this dress. Says, you got to come see it, Dad. Mom, so we go over and see this dress. It really is pretty. We'll say, but Bronwyn, you're not even engaged. You don't even have a steady guy. And she said, oh, don't worry about it, Dad. This dress is so good, it'll go with any guy. So we bought the dress. She got married in it.
Now here's our key passage for the day. And this is incredibly beautiful Hebrew. It has a lot of nuancing connotations that we need to look at. Song of Solomon 8, verse 6. Put me like an airtight, watertight lid over your heart. Like a seal, like a signet ring of authority and power over your arm, a protective cover. For love is as strong as death. And those of you that have lost a spouse, if you had a great marriage, you know that you don't stop loving that person, that they're always there with you in your heart and mind. Jealousy to possess as severe as Sheol. And This is a picture of God's love for us, his desire for us. Its flashes are flashes of fire. The picture there is of arrows, like Cupid's arrows, or lightning, feeling like you've been struck by lightning. The very flame of the Lord. That's the flame of Jehovah. It's one of the places in the Bible where Yahweh, the holy name of Jehovah, is used. Many waters cannot quench love. Many trials cannot quench that fire, nor will rivers overflow it. That's the expression that if you're on a strong foundation, nothing can wash it away. If a man were to give all the riches of his house for love, it would be utterly despised. In other words, no cost is too high because love is priceless.
Now you notice this is chapter 8. Beginning in chapter 1, he begins to court the Shunammite girl. And he moves to those first 7 chapters, and you'll find, as you understand the symbolism, he finds his future bride-to-be. He proposes to her. It talks about their courtship, what goes on there, moves into their wedding, and then into their wedding night and their marriage, their wedding night together. And chapter 8 begins, now they're married. And so you get the flow of this book, and now he's going to give us some advice, and that's what we say for grandparents, for parents, for husbands, for future husbands, some basic teachings here about love that makes a marriage or a love relationship last. 3 principles flow out of this. He says, first of all, love is pure. In other words, set me as a seal over your heart. There's a purity with this. And then he talks about the fact that love is protection. Place me like a seal on your arm. And finally, he goes into the whole discussion of love being passionate. And we talk here about the flashing flames of God, like, Cupid's arrows flaming. And he moves and talks about how passionate is this concept, this experience of love.
So let's talk first about love is pure. How do you value someone you love? You seal and protect them from contaminants and impurity. It's Tupperware love. Ladies, you put leftovers, providing your husband will eat them. You stick them in the little Tupperware thing, you close the lid down, and it keeps the mold and the bacteria out. Women, here's an example of how you protect your loved one's virtue. Guys, how you protect your loved one's virtue. You guard their honor by keeping them sexually pure until the wedding. Here's the words that the bride says to Solomon. Chapter 8, verse 12. But my own vineyard is mine to give. 1,000 shekels are for you, O Solomon, and 200 are for those who tend its fruit. Now, 1,000 shekels in those days was 3 lifetimes worth of wages. This is a picture of how precious and holy your virginity is. It's exactly like a safety deposit box. You have a key, your fiance has a key, and as you open that safety deposit box, you've chosen to open that treasure together after marriage. Why is that important? Well, there are 3 reasons why that's significant. The first one is you've based a trust foundation for your relationship. The second one is that you've helped your partner to grow spiritually. You've set him on a solid spiritual foundation. And third, you're allowing sexual freedom in your marriage relationship because there's no past back stuff that's in the back there that's hindering your trust and relationship together. Now, if you haven't stayed pure, just know that God says that's where his forgiveness comes in. It's time to pray for him to forgive you and to hold yourself pure for that person that God has for your life. And finally, our own testimony. We waited 4 years to be together, but we fell in love the first time we saw each other. My father said that he would not pay for my schooling if we got married. So we had to wait for 4 years. And we've never regretted having one partner. Sex just keeps getting better. And I'm so grateful to God that we waited for that special moment when we were married.
You make it sound like it's not hard. 4 years is a long time. Reminds me of Paul's injunction, better to marry than to burn. Well, we waited, and glad we did. That's what That's what happened to Solomon. He waited. And it's one of the most beautiful love stories in all the Bible. Now, you've heard people talk about, boy, those two have chemistry. You've heard that phrase? There's a lot of truth in that. In fact, there's a chemical that God has put within us that tends to flood our brains and our bodies whenever we're beginning to have a close encounter with someone we might love or be in love with, or even a sexual relationship. A really simplicity's sake, called oxytocin. Oxytocin. Whenever two individuals have a sexual relationship, the brain just floods the body with oxytocin. It's an attractor. All right, so it's your first sexual experience. You get attracted. In fact, in a lot of ways, you get locked into that very first partner. That's how God designed it. You know, when people love at first sight, well, you know, I saw Julie, she saw me, and it was one of those moments. In fact, we were very close together, and there was oxytocin moment for both of us, and it kind of sticks. What oxytocin does is, the more you have in your brain and your body, the more monogamous you will tend to be. The better parent you will tend to be. That's why there's a lot of oxytocin in mother's milk. It just binds that little baby to mom, imprints them, and binds mom into a parenting role. A tremendous concept here with dads. You can read a lot more about this. Matt Ridley has spoken a lot about that, R-D-L-E-Y. One of his books called Genome begins to lay out a whole lot about this concept, and it's good to know how God created us. And why it is when Solomon says, keep pure, why? Because you get locked into that very first person. It's because of the oxytocin flow that binds us together with that individual. Now, watch with me. Song of Solomon chapter 8, verse 8 and 9. We're talking here about brothers and dads and protecting sister's virginity or daughter's virginity. We have a young sister and her figure's not yet developed, all right? She's just a little child. What shall we do for our sister for the day she's spoken for? In other words, the day that, they get engaged. Here's what they say. If she's a wall, we'll build towers around her. Towers of silver. If she's a door, we'll enclose her with panels of cedar. Our job is to, you've heard dads say, well, she's 16, I'm locking her up till she's 30. Well, that's a little harsh. But that's the feeling here. We're going to protect. And if she's a wall, that means, she's closed off. You can trust her. But we'll put towers of silver. If she's a door, there's two ways to take this. She is a door, so we've got to build panels of cedar. But if they see some behaviors, then they close her in, because it's the job of dad and brothers to help keep daughters and sisters pure. Now, you can't lock them up. But what this might mean is, if you're a dad, you take very seriously the responsibility, and if you're a mom, of teaching your kids about sex. Because aren't their 11-year-old friends going to do it? And 13-year-old friends going to tell them all about it? And you know what? They don't know nothing. And our kids are learning from kids who don't know anything. So dads, forestall this. When I talked to my own girls about this, it was an awful experience. Let me tell you. Isn't it scary? You put it off, and you put it off, and then they're gone, and you never did it. Julie was fortunate. Her mom and dad talked that over with her, and we talked that over with our children. So they didn't go out into the world having no context for what's going on. That's daddy's responsibility. And even though it's very uncomfortable and it's scary as all get out, that's how we protect our children. And information here about what God says about this is really important in the protection. We're talking about purity. Well, this whole concept of purity comes in. Another example comes in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 27 and 28. Husband, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing of the water of the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. Now, what does he say there for husbands? You're responsible for your wife's what? Your purity. And if we're talking here about the spiritual leader of the house, it's your responsibility that one day when you're in heaven's glory, you present this wife to God holy and chaste and pure. What does this mean? Well, guys, we've got to watch out what we bring into the house. You got to watch out for the attitude you bring in the front door. It may not promote purity. You want to promote purity in the words you speak and the attitudes you have. You want to be thinking about what things can assault the home. You know, if you're a husband and you're into internet porn, you have just brought something in the house that defiles you and defiles your wife. That's tough for a lot of guys. But let's put this in the right perspective. We want to be sure that they're pure. So as Solomon writes in Proverbs 5, guys, keep your hearts pure. Because when your hearts are pure, you bring purity into that house. Your attitudes, your thoughts, your words. What do you bring home? What's in the house? We're talking about helping our spouses to become pure. See? That's what we do to help in the purity concept. Now, love is pure, but love also protects.
The verse says, set me as a seal upon your arm. That signet seal means that the husband has the power and the authority to be a covering and to protect his wife's physical and emotional well-being. It's not like Angelina Jolie's tattoo. You know, she tattooed Billy Bob, her second husband, on her arm. But when they broke up, then she had to go get it lasered out. And so far, I haven't seen Brad on either arm. So you can understand this is a permanent seal. A perfect example of this is the beautiful story of Ruth and Boaz in the Old Testament. Ruth was a beautiful young widow from Moab. Her husband died shortly after the honeymoon, and she chose to go with her mother-in-law, Naomi, to Israel to live. Now remember that the job of the husband was to protect and provide for his wife and his mom. So basically Ruth and Naomi were destitute. But Naomi was clever and Ruth had moxie. So this is what they did. Naomi had Ruth go over to her near relative, a rich farmer named Boaz, and she was going to glean out in the fields behind the harvesters. Well, Boaz took one look at Ruth, and instead of giving her day-old bagels, he gave her the whole bakery. And when Naomi saw this, she gave very clever advice to Ruth. Ruth got up, she put on her fanciest dress, she spritzed herself with Chanel No. 5, and she goes down to the granary where Boaz is sleeping. Then she lays at his feet and uses the robe to cover herself with a blanket. And when Boaz awoke, these are the words that he said as he smiled and spoke to Ruth.
Now you get the picture what he's going to say. This girl has just put her feet under his covers. You know, you can take that in all kinds of places in our society, and people do. But you got to understand what's going on here. He wakes up, there she is. He says, "The Lord bless you, my daughter. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You've not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. Now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. My fellow townsmen know that you are a woman of noble character." Let's see, there's a custom. Julie mentioned it. When a young woman was widowed, lost her husband, it was called a kinsman redeemer. And one of the distant or close relatives would take that woman into his household, sometimes his wife, sometimes just bringing her under his roof for protection. Because it's an awful thing to be a widow in Israel. And he was testing her. See, you didn't run after the young men. You didn't go for money. He knew who she was. You did it well. You're a great character. I'm going to bring you under my protection. Now, maybe you realize the whole book of Ruth is a picture of Jesus. And Jesus is represented by Boaz. And you and I are Ruth. And we need a covering. That's why Jesus Christ died on the cross, to put the covers over our sin. And the reason this book's in the Bible is a picture of Jesus. But the point is, for us, we protect, we cover over the women, our brides. Paul writes in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 28 and 29, in the same way, like Jesus, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hates his body, but he feeds it and cares for it, just as Jesus Christ does for his church. See? We keep them pure, but we also protect them.
I've always appreciated the fact that Roger wanted to take care of me physically. He was too broke to take me out on a date when we first met, so he got a job as a janitor at his home church cleaning potties. After a few months, they promoted him to associate pastor, but the nursery lady still came to his office to pick up the toilet paper. And as we grew together, as we married, I so appreciate the things that he did to protect and provide for me. He gave his tithe to the Lord. He based our finances on biblical foundations. He paid our taxes. He never brought us into debt. He paid for our children's college education. He saved for our retirement. He took care of insurance and wills. And all those things, Roger, I really love and appreciate that you were concerned about for me.
Thank you.
The other way that he protected me is that he treated me like someone special. Even to this day, he still opens the car door for me. He pulls out my chair at the restaurant. He carries heavy bags for me. He walks on the outside when we're on the street. And by doing those things, those acts of kindness, he is saying that he values and he cherishes me. And guys, I can assure you that if you treat a girl like a queen, she's going to love you for it.
What are these called? Manners. This is called manners. I was fortunate when I was a boy that there were some folks that took me and some other guys under their wing and taught us some manners. And isn't it nice that manners are circulating back a bit in our generation? Like Avril Lavigne. Her newest album. Listen to these words. This is the heart's desire for a woman looking for her Cinderella dream. Look, I hate it when a guy doesn't get the door, even though I told him yesterday and the day before. I hate it when a guy doesn't get the tab, and I have to pull my money out, and that looks bad. What's she longing for? Where are the hopes? Where are the dreams? My Cinderella story. Seen. When do you think they'll finally see? These are the guys. When are they going to finally wake up? And I love this because a very popular artist who's making an appeal to, hey guys, wake up. These are girls. These are biblical things in one sense that she's singing to today's culture.
Now here's the fun part. Love is a mighty flame. Let's talk about old flames for just a minute, Roger. My very first kiss came from George McCaleb. He gave me a Cracker Jack ring in first grade, and he kissed me on the playground. And I told the teacher, so he had to stay after school. But then in second grade, I was in a kissing contest, and I had to stay after school.
Yeah.
Don't tell anybody, please.
I've always thought you're a lot faster than I because I didn't get my first kiss till I was in second grade. Her name was Janet Burnett. How many of you kissed a girl in second grade? Anybody? Yes, sir. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you. I've never forgotten Janet, It was one of those oxytocin moments. I picture her face, that moment, My fifth grade love. Oops. Well, you should have heard the first service, but we're not going to go there. My fifth grade love was a young lady named Hera Hunt. I really liked Hera a lot. And you know what? Her uncle was Lamar Hunt, who owned the Kansas City Chiefs.
See, you only loved her for her money.
No, I didn't realize how important that was back then.
Yeah, well, what about Molly? You always talked about Molly.
Molly, we were on a date once, and she threw up in the front seat of my car. We never dated again. That was it with Molly. Well, think about some of yours. How about Marshall Millsap? You loved him for a lot of years.
Oh, yeah, for about 5 years. Well, I looked him up on the internet, and he's Global Vice President of Chase Bank.
Can you beat that? It's like Ricky said when he discovered that. Julie, Mom, you sure did trade down. I'm so sorry. So sorry. And I think about some of your guys. Man, you remember, this is true. So we're meeting each other and kind of falling in love. And I found out later, on the side, Stuart Depew, a guy named Bill, a guy up in Wisconsin, a guy named Don Gillenwater in Austin, and we all thought that Julie was our girlfriend. Can you beat that?
Well, I was a little ADD back then. What can I say? But the truth is that the Bible says that if you're an old flame, you're not a flame at all, because true flame is forever. Flames last forever. And this especially refers to passion and sex. So Roger and I are going to read to you a couple of romantic poems that Solomon and his bride said to each other.
Glenn referred to this one a little bit last week, but there's, a little different perspective on things. See, you're still hot. You really are. You're still my flame. I just think you're the best. Well, that's what Solomon says here. I'd say it to you. How beautiful you are, my darling. Oh, how beautiful. What did I just say? She's really hot. See, you thought I was just kidding. This is right out of the Bible. She's really hot. Your eyes behind your veil are doves. What are we talking about here? Feathery eyebrows.
No, feathery eyelashes.
Feathery eyelashes. Feathery eyelashes. See? It's like doves. Your hair is like a flock of goats descending from Mount Gilead. Boy, that's a great image, isn't it? Now, what is this? It's symbolic. What's one of the most beautiful pictures they could have? See, they made their money from goats. And the goats have been up in the winter, up there grazing, and now they're white, they're beautiful, they're coming down. It's beautiful. It's their income. See? I could almost say to you, wow, this is so cool. Your hair is like the Dow Jones Industrial Average in a bull market. Oh, that would be so sweet, see?
I feel loved.
See, there's a lot in here, if you look for it. Your teeth are like a flock of sheep, just shorn, coming up from its washing. What does that say? She brushes her teeth. See? Is there anything more clean than a white sheep just shorn coming from the washing? Reminds me of his teeth. Each tooth has its twin. Not one of them is alone. You've got all your teeth.
Thank you.
Your lips are like a scarlet ribbon. Your mouth is lovely. It really is. I've always loved that about you. Your temples behind your veil are like the halves of a pomegranate. Now, you can mess this up. See? The pomegranates have red seeds. See? Your pimples are... No. You don't go there. See? That's not where you go with this. What's he talking about? The ruby red cheeks, see? And the red complexion, the beautiful rose complexion you have. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built with elegance. On it hangs 1,000 shields. All the shields are warriors. What is he talking about there? He's talking about her necklaces. See? He talks about the beauty and the way she dresses. And then he goes on and gets a little more explicit, which Julie won't let me go there. And it'll be a great Bible study for you guys later on. But we'll stop there because this is his love map. And he's talking about her beauty and how much she appreciates not just the beauty, but the character of her heart.
Remember, love is blind.
Love is blind.
Song of Solomon 5:10 through 16. My lover is radiant and ruddy. I love those pink cheeks.
Thank you.
Outstanding among 10,000. I can pick you out of any crowd. His head is purest gold. Well, I'll go for silver. I like that. His hair is wavy. I'm just glad you have some.
Thank you.
His eyes are like doves by the water streams, washed in milk, mounted like jewels. They're gentle and sparkling. His cheeks are like beds of spice-yielding perfume. I love your aftershave.
Thank you.
His lips are like lilies dripping with myrrh. You're a great kisser. His arms are rods of gold set with chrysolite. You work out at LA Fitness.
5 days a week.
That's right. His body is like polished ivory decorated with sapphire. You've got buns of steel. His legs are pillars of marble set on bases of pure gold. Thank God you cut your toenails. Your appearance is like Lebanon, choice as its cedars. Your mouth is sweetness itself. You've stopped eating jalapeno hot dogs from Circle
Just
K.
for you.
Thank you, God. You are altogether lovely. You are my lover and my friend.
Thank you. And thank God love is blind. Isn't that true?
Now remember, we just said lovers and friends, and I bet most of you have figured out at this point, as a matter of fact, I think this is what Glenn and Angie talked about last week, that guys and girls are very different in their approach to love.
See, this is Solomon's love map, okay? That's fair. That's what this is. And as you understand the context and you understand the symbols, you begin to realize what a powerful love map it is. He describes their love experience. We discovered that when Julie and I are teaching or interacting with folks literally all over the world, most couples don't talk about sex. They might do it, of course, but they don't talk about it. What do you like? What do you like? It's kind of an off-limit subject. We've discovered that most couples won't talk about finances. They won't sit down and work out a budget and deal with their finances, so they kind of just muddle along. Most couples don't talk about spiritual things. It's too personal. And we've discovered most couples don't talk about sex either. So here's an idea for you and your spouse to make your own love map. Would that be okay? Make your own love map. Here's a little love map exercise. From my point of view, this is what we recommend to couples sometimes in some of our seminars. From my point of view, a perfect romantic encounter with my spouse would include. Then you write it down. You put it in a brown paper envelope where the kids can find it. And no, you don't do that. You write it down, put it in a brown paper envelope. The next time you're together, you might read each other's love maps because most couples don't talk about this. So let's do the little exercise, okay? I want you to take out a piece of paper and a pencil, okay? Go ahead, it's okay. Don't be afraid. Take out a piece of paper and a pencil, okay? And we're going to give you a few minutes to write down what your love map would look like, all right? Then I want you to fold it. Pass it to the aisles. Julie and I'll be down in a minute and pick those up. Okay?
Just kidding.
Don't do this now.
Do this later,
Just
okay?
kidding, all right? But it can be a marvelous, marvelous exercise. Sure it can.
You know, a guy's love map and a girl's love map are very, very different. One of the most interesting that we ever heard was a gal in Oklahoma, and this is what she wrote on her love map. Wednesday night, home on time for dinner. Thursday night, take me for a walk. Friday night, take me out to a movie. And Saturday night, well, she just got more explicit then. But that was her love map.
Can you imagine most guys would look at that and say, what? That's just wasting time. That's just wasting time. Sure. That's one of the reasons love maps are important. Because guys and gals are so different. If you don't communicate, well, Solomon communicates. Gives us a marvel example. You know, what turns on a man or a woman is really rather different, all right? Now, I want you to think of this just for a moment. Here's a principle that Julie and I followed for many years. In fact, I think it started even before we got married. Here's what we've done for many, many moons. We decided a long time ago that here's God, and this is a very biblical principle. Here's God, and here's Julie. Okay?
Give me some hair.
Okay, here's Roger.
There you go.
Is that better?
Uh-huh.
So here's Julie, here's Roger, and you know, here we are in our relationship, and we'll just assume that we're this far apart, but let's assume that our heart's desire is to love God first. We love God first, love others second. So let's decide that we're going to put the focus of our life on knowing intimately our relationship with God. That's a very fair thing to do. We're all asked to do that. And here's what we discovered. The closer we each get to God, the closer we get to each other. It's been a great experience. Loved it. I think before we even got married, back just dating in college, we decided, okay, we're going to keep our spiritual lives in place. We're both going to seek God first. And I think that's one of the reasons we've had a nice long marriage. Enjoyed most every minute of it.
You know, I'll never forget that you read the entire New Testament to me on tape. And when we were separated, I just listened to it night after night.
Yeah, that was pretty special. I did that so that Bill and the guy in Wisconsin and the other guys wouldn't hear my voice. I wanted you to hear my voice. Yeah, I read the whole New Testament on tape. Just because she wanted to listen to it in her car. Seek first the kingdom. his righteousness. And what? All these things will be added to you. And I'm convinced that even includes a wonderful life together with your flame that lasts for eternity. Now, when you read the book of Solomon, you realize, remember I mentioned 3 levels. You can read on the surface level and you can miss a whole lot of stuff, but there's a story on the surface level. Or you can go to the second level and you understand the symbolism and see his love map. Or you go to the third level. And there's a deep running third level through here. And it's as if God is represented by Solomon, and Shunammite woman represents us. And there's a picture here of God's divine love for us. It's almost a divine romance. And if you watch for this, passage after passage, you'll see all over again through the Scriptures, God pouring his divine romance out on us. So we thought it might be helpful to kind of experience a little divine romance through communion this morning. Would that be all right? Because there's perhaps no greater picture of Jesus' love, compassion for us, in romancing us, in dying for our sins. So let's take a moment. So we bow our heads and to get our hearts ready. I want you to think of a sin you committed this week. Say, I don't have any. Well, think a little harder. Maybe go back 2 weeks if you have to. And just one. I want you to say to God, I'm sorry for what I did. Forgive me. Confess it. And then you might say something like this. You know, Jesus, if mine was the only sin committed last week, or for all time, you still would have died on the cross for me. Isn't that true? See, when you and I think about that, our hearts are getting prepared and ready to meet with Jesus at the cross. So may our hearts be prepared and ready. All right, you may look up. And let me remind you that on Passover night, he took the cup and the bread and he blessed it. And he took that bread and he passed it out to his disciples.